The story begins with a young man named Kelvin has recently been reborn in a different world. He accidentally died due to a god's mistake, granting him the opportunity to select his skills for his new life. Upon awakening, Kelvin finds himself disoriented and unaware of his location. A menu appears, welcoming him to the new world. Curiously, he presses the start button and hears a welcoming voice. The voice explains that Kelvin has been reincarnated into a fantasy realm, with his memories wiped as a condition he agreed to in exchange for more powerful skills. Kelvin is taken aback by the fact that his past self willingly agreed to have his memories erased. As the status window opens, revealing the skills he chose, Kelvin becomes excited about embarking on his adventure. The voice instructs him to proceed to the nearby town and register at the guild to become an adventurer. On his journey, Kelvin asks the menu if it will accompany him during his adventure. Remembering his memory loss, the menu discloses that it is actually Malphina, the goddess of reincarnation whom he fell in love with. He had asked her to be his servant, and she accepted the request as a means of taking a break from her job. Kelvin is puzzled as to how he could have loved her without his memories. He expresses his desire to summon her, but she explains that he needs to become stronger and possess more mana before he can do so. Arriving at the Adventurers Guild, Kelvin registers as a basic mage while keeping his summoner skill a secret. Malphina explains that summoners are extremely rare, to the point where kings would start wars to acquire them. Kelvin starts at the lowest rank, F, and the clerk informs him that he can only accept missions up to one rank higher than his current one. He can advance to a higher rank after completing 10 consecutive missions. Kelvin takes his first job, which involves defeating blue slimes. He equips himself with a wooden rod, enhancing his magical abilities, and sets off to the fields. While exploring, Kelvin encounters 3 slimes. Malphina suggests that he tries using his other S-rank skill, the Praising Eye, which allows him to see the stats of any slime at his rank and up to 100 levels above him. Malphina informs him that he can tame the slime if he weakens it first. Kelvin decides to attack the slime with his rod instead of using magic, so as not to defeat it in a single blow. Surprisingly, the slimes prove to be more challenging than expected, but eventually, he manages to land a hit on one, weakening it enough to be tamed. The taming is successful, and he names the slime Clotho. Summoning Clotho, Kelvin notices that it has gained a personality, happily jumping up and down. Together, they continue battling more slimes. Kelvin utilizes his wind magic to defeat one slime in a single strike, while Clotho swiftly deals with the others. Kelvin realizes that Clotho has become much stronger since becoming his summon. Malphina explains that his S-rank summoner skill provides a bonus of 100 to all of his servant's stats. She also mentions that he is the only S-rank summoner in this world, with others only reaching B or C rank. Returning to the town, Kelvin seeks an inn to spend the night. Along the way, he spots an elf imprisoned in a cage. He is disturbed by the prevalence of slavery in this world but tries to push the thought aside. Kelvin finds a room at an inn and enjoys his first meal in this new world. Kelvin starts grinding and leveling up, acquiring new skills. He learns the concealment skill, enabling him to hide his stats and summoner skill from others. Clotho undergoes evolution and transforms into a gigantic gluttonous slime. Within a week, Kelvin's rank has already been promoted to E. His swift advancement and solo mission completion draw attention to him. A D-rank adventurer named Cashel introduces himself and proposes that Kelvin join his party for a D-rank hunt to slay a black ghost knight. Using his appraisal skill, Kelvin notices that Cashel has a murderer title. Instead of joining him, Kelvin suggests a competition to see who can defeat the monster first. Cashel departs and joins his criminal party members, Gimmel and Raj, who plan to murder Kelvin. Arriving at a ruined castle, Cashel's party is surprised to find all the monsters already slain. Kelvin appears and exposes their scheme, challenging them to a fight. He taunts Raj, who impulsively charges at him, only to fall into a trap hidden by Kelvin's concealment skill. Raj becomes trapped and begins to sink. Kelvin attacks with his wind magic, while Gimmel seizes the opportunity to escape. However, Clotho blocks their exit and chases Kimmel back inside. Clotho swiftly defeats Kimmel with a single strike and restrains Raj. Cashel charges at Kelvin but is easily defeated as well. They confess to targeting new players for experience. Kelvin ties them up, intending to turn them in. Continuing his hunt, Kelvin encounters the monster he was searching for and asks it to join his party. To Kelvin's surprise, the monster's name is Gerard, who turns out to be surprisingly kind, resembling an old uncle. Gerard even offers Kelvin some candy. Gerard explains that he was once a human knight but transformed into a black ghost after his death. Before agreeing to join Kelvin, Gerard wants to assess Kelvin's strength. They engage in a duel, where Gerard successfully blocks all of Clotho's attacks. Gerard retaliates with a slash that Kelvin narrowly dodges. While Clotho continues to attack, Kelvin employs his air magic to restrict Gerard's movements. With a sudden recollection of his past, Gerard reveals his desire for revenge against an elf named Gildora. Gildora destroyed the kingdom Gerard served, resulting in the death of his wife and daughter. Empowered by this memory, Gerard breaks free from Kelvin's magic and charges at him. However, Kelvin restrains Gerard once again, and Clotho unleashes a massive beam attack against him. The following day, Kelvin presents a piece of Gerard's armor as proof of completing the mission. The guild members are astonished by his accomplishment. Combined with apprehending Kimmel, this leads to Kelvin receiving a special promotion to D rank. Gerard joins Clotho and Malphina as Kelvin's newest monster. At the guild, Kelvin encounters Leo, the guild master, who surprises him by asking if he is from another world. Kelvin realizes that Leo's appraisal skill is stronger than his concealment skill, allowing him to see all of Kelvin's stats and skills. In Leo's office, Kelvin has no choice but to admit being a summoner. He confronts Leo about his inaction regarding Michelle, and Leo confesses that he knew Cashel was a murderer but needed evidence due to his noble status in the Tristan nation. Leo expresses gratitude to Kelvin for dealing with Cashel and eventually expresses his desire to become friends, mentioning that he has met other people from different worlds before, such as the heroes of the Holy Empire Deramus. Malphina reveals that she was the one who reincarnated them and promises to share more details with Kelvin later. Leo continues explaining about the heroes of Deramus, stating that the priestess informed them about the revival of the Demon Lord. The influence of the Demon Lord has made all other monsters stronger and more aggressive. Recognizing that Kelvin already possesses the skills of an S-ranked adventurer, Leo asks him to protect the town in place of the heroes. After negotiations, Leo offers Kelvin various incentives, such as increasing his rank and providing assistance on missions. Later, back at the inn, the innkeeper Claire congratulates Kelvin for reaching B rank. While enjoying his lunch in his room, Kelvin asks Malphina about the heroes of Deramus. She informs him that 1 year ago, the priestess of the Deramus Empire performed a summoning ritual, reincarnating other individuals based on their attractiveness and knowledge. Upon hearing this, Kelvin retrieves his reward money from Clotho, whom he has been using for storage due to Clotho's gluttonous ability. Kelvin heads to the alleyway where slaves are being sold, informing Gerard of his plan to train a slave as his rear guard to enhance the party's strength. In the alleyway, Kelvin notices a man on fire and recognizes the half-elf he saw before. The slave trader reveals that nobody wants to buy her due to a curse where she burns anyone who touches her. Using his appraisal skill, Kelvin discovers that she is cursed by the Fire Dragon King. Malphina explains that the only way to remove the curse is within a ranked white magic spell called Sacred Bless. Kelvin leaves, and later he returns to offer to buy the elf. The slave trader is initially confused but agrees when Kelvin presents a bag of gold. As they head back to the inn, the elf introduces herself as Aphiel and expresses gratitude to Kelvin for purchasing her. However, she hesitates to touch him due to fear of hurting him with her curse. Kelvin casts Sacred Bless on Aphiel, breaking the curse. Overwhelmed by being able to touch someone for the first time, Aphiel breaks down in tears of gratitude. They return to the inn, where Aphiel is taken under the care of Claire. Aphiel is dressed in a maid's outfit, and they enjoy dinner together. Kelvin reveals his secrets to Aphiel, telling her that he is a summoner and introducing her to Gerard and Clotho. He assists Aphiel in allocating her skill points and allows her to make her own decisions. However, at night, they are forced to share a bed, causing Kelvin to have a sleepless night. After 1 month, Aphiel becomes a deadly archer by combining the Dragon King's blessing with archery, creating her own unique skill. At the guild, Angie, the guild secretary, congratulates them on another successful mission. Angie has become friends with Aphiel and tells her about a new dessert cafe in town. They decide to check it out, and Aphiel invites Kelvin to join them. The next day, the three of them meet up, and Kelvin is amazed by how cute Aphiel looks. They go to the cafe, and Kelvin feels embarrassed when Aphiel tries to feed him. Everyone watches them with jealousy, thinking Kelvin is on a date with 2 girls. Suddenly, their table is knocked over by the arrival of Tibira, the 3rd prince of Tryson, and his 2 guards. The prince arrogantly sends his guards to grab Angie and Aphiel, but Kelvin defeats them and sends them flying. Kelvin uses his magic to bind Tibira and forces him to explain his business. Tibira admits that he came to hire a rumored strong adventurer to improve his poor reputation. Kelvin reveals that he is the adventurer and rejects his offer. Meanwhile, Malphina visits the Temple of Deramus and meets Colette, the Oracle. Colette shows her the progress of the heroes and shares a prophecy, instructing the heroes to deal with an evil in the west and to stay away from Parth, where Kelvin is staying. Malphina leaves just as the heroes arrive, and Colette informs them of their new mission. Back at the inn, Aphiel asks Kelvin if he finds her attractive. Kelvin becomes flustered, and Aphiel tells him that she loves him. Kelvin reassures her but resists his desires because she is still a slave, and he doesn't want to take advantage of her. The next day, Malphina shows Kelvin the stats of the heroes of Deramus. Kelvin is unimpressed to see that they are only around level 50 after a whole year. Malphina is also disappointed in them and notices that Kelvin has already almost surpassed them. Claire interrupts, informing them that the guild has called for them. Kelvin meets with Leo, who tells him about a sealed demon discovered in a hidden room of a dungeon. Malphina explains that demons are among the most powerful beings in this world. Leo mentions the trouble caused by Kelvin's attack on the Tryson prince, and Kelvin readily accepts the mission. Kelvin and his party enter the dungeon and make their way through the cave to reach the hidden room. Inside, they find the sealed demon, and there is a second demon who introduces itself as Victor, the archdemon. Kelvin inquires about the sealed demon, and Victor reveals that she is the daughter of the recently defeated demon lord, sealed by magic that only a human can break. Victor hopes to consume Kelvin to gain the human ability to break the seal and then devour the girl to become the next demon lord. Victor blocks the exit and charges at them, but Gerard manages to block him. Kelvin attempts to restrain his movements, but Victor easily breaks free. Kelvin starts smiling, and Gerard reveals to Afiel that Kelvin has an unfortunate habit. He becomes excited like a thrill-seeker when facing powerful opponents. Yes, he is a hardcore battle junkie. Victor tries to level the playing field by summoning skeletons with his black magic. The skeletons attack, but Kelvin and his party are able to defend themselves and easily defeat them. Impressed by their teamwork, Victor punches the ground, creating a smoke screen. However, Kelvin uses his magic to track him and predicts his next move. Victor attacks from underground, but Gerard blocks the hit thanks to Kelvin's warning. An arm tries to grab Kelvin, but he manages to dodge it. Victor overpowers Gerard and blasts him away. Victor continues his attack on Kelvin with his arm and closes in on him. Kelvin calls for Clotho, who attaches itself to Victor's arm and starts absorbing his magic. While Victor is distracted, Kelvin casts a binding spell and seals one of Victor's arms. Victor tries to free himself while Kelvin enhances Gerard's sword with his Vortex Edge spell. Victor attempts to counterattack with his other arm, but Afiel emerges from stealth and fires a blazing arrow. Victor blocks the arrow, sacrificing his arm, and Gerard slashes and severs the other arm. Despite the setbacks, Victor doesn't give up. He covers himself with black smoke and begins to transform. The trio tries to attack before he completes his transformation, but they are too late. In his new form, Victor dashes to attack. Gerard manages to block him and even push him back, but he eventually gets knocked down by Victor. Afiel provides support with her arrows, and Kelvin summons Clotho, who unleashes a barrage of cursed weapons on Victor. Drawing strength from all their previous failures, Kelvin's blacksmithing, Afiel's skills, and Clotho's attacks combine with devastating force against Victor. He is sent flying, and a stone pillar breaks and falls towards Sarah. Victor protects her with the last of his strength and falls. Kelvin asks why Victor protected her. Victor confesses that he had no intention of eating Sarah. In reality, he was Sarah's caretaker and taught her how to fight. He was her only companion. However, they were attacked by the hero of the Empire, and before he died, Sarah's father sealed her away for her safety and entrusted Victor with watching over her. Victor had planned to revive Sarah in a weaker era where she could rule as the Demon King. As his dying wish, Victor asks Kelvin to add Sarah to his party so she can finally explore the world. Kelvin agrees, and Victor peacefully passes away. Despite the risk of her becoming the next Demon King, Kelvin breaks her seal, and Sarah awakens. Understanding her situation and grieving for Victor, Kelvin reports his success to the other adventurers and pretends that Sarah was one of Victor's victims. With her magic hairband, Sarah is able to conceal her wings and horns. Gerard evolves into an Abyssal Knight Commander, an S-ranked monster, gaining a significant boost to his stats. Sarah worries about joining the team, but Kelvin assures her that his S-ranked concealment skill will keep her identity as the Demon Lord's daughter hidden. The team returns to town, and Sarah is fascinated and thrilled by everything she sees. Having always been alone, this is her first time in a town. Later, Kelvin checks in with Leo at the guild, who promotes him to a higher rank for defeating Victor. When he returns to the inn, there is a surprise party to celebrate his promotion. They have a wild night, and everyone ends up drunk outside. Sarah mourns for Victor, who was her only childhood companion, and decides to experience the entire world in his memory. She especially wants to see the ocean and fulfill the promise of learning to swim, just as Victor once promised her. Some time passes, and Kelvin and Afiel's crafting skills reach S rank, resulting in the party acquiring new gear. Sarah receives a new outfit and gauntlets made from Victor's carapace, and Gerard obtains a new demonic sword called the Dane Sleeve. After the crafting, Kelvin becomes exhausted, and Afiel offers to cook him some food. He requests rice, but Afiel is unfamiliar with it. Kelvin becomes obsessed with craving rice, which he hasn't been able to eat since arriving in this world. The party sets off towards the coastal city of Torridge, where they can find rice and Sarah can continue exploring the world. Gerard informs them that Melfine is missing, as she left to possess one of her proxies to join them in the physical world since Kelvin can't summon her. Gerard suspects that Melfine is jealous of the two ladies in the party. During their journey, their carriage is stopped by a woman, and a gang of bandits appears. The bandits proudly declare themselves as the notorious Black Wind Gang. Kelvin checks their stats and realizes they are only around level 30. He instructs Sarah to deal with them without using her new gauntlets. Sarah effortlessly sends one of the bandits flying, surprised by how weak they are. One of the bandits attacks with a giant hammer, but Sarah easily stops him and pushes him away. Sarah manages to tie them all up, but the woman brags about their boss, who is at level 70. This piques Kelvin's interest, and he interrogates her. The group reaches Torridge, and Sarah is amazed by the sight of the ocean, remembering her promise with Victor to swim. Calvin agrees to teach her, but first, they visit the guild to turn in the bandits. Calvin meets with Miss, the guildmaster in Torridge. She has already heard about Calvin from Leo, with whom she used to be in a party. Calvin informs Miss that the boss of the Black Wind gang is actually Kristoff, the champion of Trison. He pretended to destroy the gang but took it over from the shadows and is involved in illegal slave trading. Kristoff is currently in town, but they need solid proof to accuse him. Calvin, however, isn't particularly interested because Kristoff, at level 70, poses no challenge. Suddenly, Calvin detects the presence of the Empire's heroes and suggests that they handle the bandits. With this suggestion, Miss asks the heroes to investigate the bandit hideout. Wanting to help the people, the heroes accept the request. Meanwhile, at the bandit hideout, there is a room filled with kidnapped women. One of the bandits enters and tries to grab one of the girls, but Calvin and Gerard intervene. Gerard knocks him out, preventing the harm. Meanwhile, Kristoff and his lieutenants discuss the loss of one of their squads. There is a knock at the door, and Calvin's party bursts in. Kristoff seeks revenge for his friends, but Calvin swiftly deals with him, preparing for the main event. The heroes arrive at the hideout and find it strangely empty. They encounter Clotho and attempt to fight it, but one of the slaves protects it, claiming that Clotho belongs to their savior. The slaves introduce themselves as the heroes of Daramus. Relieved upon hearing this, all the slaves express their gratitude. One of the heroes, a summoner, can communicate with Clotho. The summoner reveals that he was left to protect the slaves. A slave urges the heroes to assist Calvin with the bandits. The heroes rush ahead and discover the defeated Kristoff and his lieutenants on the floor, assuming that they are the adventurers who saved the slaves. They find Calvin and his team, pretending to be the true leaders of Black Wind. Calvin provokes the heroes and challenges them to a game. He suggests fighting them all alone, with the loser obligated to follow the winner's command. Toya hesitates due to the dishonorable nature of the challenge, but Setsuna advises him to join forces and convinces him to accept. Eventually, they all agree to Calvin's game. During this time, Calvin reveals his plan to use the heroes as witnesses to expose Kristoff's involvement with the bandits, circumventing his protection from Trison. Gerard remarks on Calvin's obsession with battles, pretending to be bandits just for the sake of fighting the heroes. Gerard expresses concern and warns Calvin not to underestimate them despite their lower level. However, Calvin is eager to test his abilities and his new Eater Glove skill. The heroes commence their attack by summoning their spirits to enhance their strength. Toya charges forward, but Calvin counters with a powerful magic blast, while the heroes defend against the assault. Calvin swiftly moves past them and approaches Mizoka. However, Mizoka summons her dragon, which breathes fire at Calvin. With his enhanced speed, Calvin manages to evade the flames and appears behind Miyabi. Using his Eater Glove, he steals Miyabi's unique skill, Parallel Processing. Sarah explains that each glove can copy one skill at a time, and Calvin has also borrowed one of her skills. With Miyabi's skill in his possession, Calvin overwhelms Toya as he attempts to aid Miyabi. Setsuna and Mizoka tend to Miyabi's injuries while Toya continues fighting alone, believing he has the advantage in close combat. However, Calvin fights back, utilizing Sarah's S-ranked fighter skill that he borrowed. He dominates Toya but encounters resistance when Setsuna joins the fray. Calvin skillfully dodges her attacks and summons a massive wall to defend himself. Cindy, with her ability to cut through anything, swiftly destroys the wall with a single slash. As the wall disappears, Calvin lunges toward her, unleashing an enormous fireball. Yet, Toya intercedes and blocks the attack. Mizoka attempts to heal Toya, but he insists that he is fine, proclaiming that such an attack means nothing if he is to defeat the Demon Lord in the future. However, Setsuna slaps him, expressing anger at his self-sacrifice and urging him to value himself more and rely on the team. Mizoka and Miyabi both agree. Toya apologizes, and they decide to fight as a team once again. As Calvin prepares to resume the battle, a spirit materializes and explodes in a blinding light. Mizoka employs her frost spell to immobilize Calvin, and Miyabi utilizes her gravity magic to further restrict his movements. With Calvin locked in place, Toya and Setsuna charge towards him, but Calvin employs his detonation spell, causing a massive explosion around him. Toya and Setsuna are caught in the blast but manage to survive due to the protection from their spirits. As the smoke dissipates, Calvin applauds their attempt. The heroes are astonished to see Calvin completely unharmed after the explosion. Calvin criticizes their amateurish approach and even offers hints on how to improve. He specifically calls out Toya for not utilizing his unique skill. Toya reveals the true form of his sword, splitting it into two and allowing him to dual wield. He charges at Calvin once again, supported by his team. Mizoka employs her ultimate spell, Frozen Temple, creating a massive pillar of ice that completely binds Calvin. Miyabi summons her strongest minion, the Grave over Sarah. From the sidelines, Sarah taunts Calvin, offering to rescue him, which he declines. Miyabi attacks with a blast of dark energy, but Calvin summons golems to absorb the attack. He commands them to buy him 30 seconds while he creates a new spell to free himself from the ice. Normally, creating new spells can take days, but thanks to the stolen parallel processing skill, Kelvin can expedite the process. Mazoka warns the others about Kelvin's new spell, and Setsuna slashes through the golems. However, Kelvin finishes creating his spell and unleashes a barrage of energy that simultaneously destroys the ice, freeing himself. Setsuna lunges at him, but Kelvin's speed allows him to strike her in the stomach. He effortlessly evades the ogre's attacks and incapacitates Miyabi. Mazoka attempts to help, riding on her dragon, but gets knocked out of the sky. Toya catches her and becomes enraged, launching a wild attack at Kelvin. However, he is ultimately knocked out with a single punch. When Toya regains consciousness, he finds his team and the young slave girl with him. The girl sits willingly on Kelvin's lap with Clotho, and Toya demands that Kelvin release her. Kelvin tells him to take a closer look, and Toya realizes that the girl is there of her own accord and that Kelvin was the adventurer who saved them. Toya is puzzled why they didn't clear up the misunderstanding earlier, but realizes that Kelvin had given them tips to help them improve. He admits defeat, thanks Kelvin, and calls him his master. Kelvin reminds him that they had promised to obey his order. Toya prepares for anything, but Kelvin orders them to strip their clothes, embarrassing them all. He then has them change into swim clothes and takes them to a sea cave to train. The heroes struggle as they battle a giant octopus with skin too soft and slippery to cut through. Kelvin watches, unimpressed, shouting out ways to help them improve. Eventually, the heroes manage to defeat the octopus, and the group takes a break for lunch. Kelvin notes their struggle against the octopus and asserts that they stand no chance against a dungeon boss or the demon lord. He asks them what they would do if they encountered a monster they couldn't defeat. Meanwhile, Sarah fishes up the dungeon boss dragon. Toya responds that they would retreat to train and prepare before facing it again once they were stronger. Kelvin is satisfied with their answer and takes charge of handling the dragon. Afterward, the heroes bid farewell and board a ship to the western continent. Kelvin presents them with pendants as parting gifts, and they exchange goodbyes as Kelvin watches them sail away. He asks Gerard about the western continent, which is home to the elves that destroyed Gerard's kingdom. Kelvin inquires if they are strong enough to seek revenge. Gerard is touched that Kelvin remembers and suggests that they would indeed be capable. Sarah interrupts and mentions that they have been summoned by the Queen of Torridge. They arrive at the castle, which Kelvin recognizes as having a Japanese appearance. Gerard mentions that the first king of Taurus was said to be from another world. They enter the castle and pay their respects to the queen, who expresses gratitude for their assistance with the bandits in defeating the dragon boss. The queen offers them a reward, but Kelvin only asks for some of her rice. Amused by the request, the queen grants him a lifetime supply. They enjoy a feast, and Kelvin finally gets to savor the rice, while the others watch, amused. A few days later, Kelvin stays at the castle at the queen's request. Aphil brings him his lunch, and she has already mastered all the Japanese dishes. The queen joins him for lunch, praising Aphil's culinary skills. She tries to convince Kelvin to give Aphil to her, but he declines. She then attempts to proposition Kelvin to stay in Torch and personally take care of her, but he quickly refuses and suggests it's time for them to leave and return to Parth. The queen allows them to use the teleportation gate. Back in the city, Kelvin purchases a new house for the party and hires two of the freed slaves, Ellie and her daughter Luca, as household servants. At night, Kelvin struggles to adjust to his new bed and quickly gets up as he senses Malphina's return with her avatar body. Malphina informs him that he can now summon her and expresses her intention to win his heart. Kelvin summons her, revealing her angelic presence. She asks for his thoughts, and he becomes nervous, realizing how his past self fell in love with her at first sight. Malphina finally meets the rest of the party in person and playfully teases Kelvin, referring to herself as his first wife. As a gift for successfully summoning her, Malphina draws a red flower and blesses Kelvin as the goddess of reincarnation. The blessing has two effects. First, protection from fatal attacks once a month, which excites Sarah for her next sparring match with Kelvin. And second, the ability to summon heroes. Sarah engages in a sparring session with Malphina while Gerard and Luca observe. Sarah transforms her arm into a demonic claw, but Malphina counters with her divine spear, resulting in the destruction of both the spear and Sarah's claw. Meanwhile, Kelvin contemplates summoning a hero but worries about forcing someone to come to the world against their will. The fight between Sarah and Malphina ends with both fighters being evenly matched. Gerard questions why they fought so seriously, and they reveal that they were vying for the privilege of sleeping with Kelvin. Later, Malphina surprises Kelvin with some chocolate and asks about his thoughts. Kelvin shares his worries and questions why heroes are needed in this world. Malphina explains that all demon lords possess two special skills, the ability to drive anyone insane and invulnerability to all damage. However, heroes are exceptions to both skills because they come from another world with different magic, enabling them to defeat the demon lord. Despite this explanation, Kelvin still feels guilty about summoning someone. Malphina suggests that Kelvin can summon people who have already died, making it more like giving them a second chance rather than kidnapping someone. Kelvin finds comfort in this suggestion and asks if he can choose who he summons. Malphina informs him that the summoning process is random, and there is no rush to make a decision. Later that night, Kelvin makes up his mind and decides to immediately reincarnate a hero. He casts the summoning spell, using up all his mana to summon the strongest hero possible. A bolt of lightning strikes, and a young girl named Ryo is summoned. Kelvin introduces himself, and Ryo expresses gratitude for being reincarnated. However, she collapses shortly after the reincarnation. Kelvin wonders if Ryo is truly a hero, but Malphina assures him that she is the best. Soon after, Kelvin himself collapses from using up all his mana. When Ryo wakes up, it is revealed that she had suffered from a terminal illness. She meets Kelvin outside, who shares his own experience of being reincarnated. Grateful for her new healthy body, Ryo offers to join Kelvin's party to repay him. Kelvin informs her that people with black hair are rare in this world and suggests that she pretend to be his younger half-sister. Ryo likes the idea and eagerly embraces the role of having an elder brother. Kelvin is bothered by Ryo's name as it reminds him of the guildmaster Leo. In response, Ryo decides to change her name to Rion. Later that night, Kelvin wakes up to find Sarah and Malphina sneaking into his bed. To his surprise, Rion is also hiding under the covers. Kelvin takes a moment to reflect on his new life. The next day, Kelvin takes Rion to a dungeon. Ellie asks why they were brought along, and Kelvin explains that it's for their own safety and to level up a bit. Luca expresses fear of the monsters, but Kelvin reassures her that they don't need to fight. He has an XP sharing skill, so as his party kills the monsters, everyone will level up. They encounter a shadow wolf, but Kelvin easily restrains it with his spell and tames it as a pet dog for Rion. Ifil notices the approaching adventurer Olden and his party. Kelvin explains that they are here for their promotion exam to rank B by slaying monsters. He introduces his new party members, and the adventurers become jealous of the number of girls in his group and run off. Sarah and Gerard return after seeing Olden's party and inquire about the situation. Kelvin informs them about the exam, but Sarah nervously reveals that they have already killed all the monsters in the dungeon. Ifil uses her Farsight ability to confirm that there are no monsters left. Kelvin ends up apologizing to Olden, who is amazed at how strong Kelvin has become and excited for Kelvin's upcoming S-rank promotion exam. They give the wolf a bath, and Rion reveals that she named him Alex. Thanks to one of her skills, she is able to understand him. Over the next few weeks, Rion trains with the other party members and bonds with Alex. One night, Sarah detects a group of intruders consisting of 14 individuals. Kelvin uses the borrowed Farsight skill from Ifil to check their stats and finds that they are all around level 20. Kelvin decides to test Rion's skills. Initially nervous, Rion agrees to the challenge. Kelvin gives him a piece of clotho and a new mithril sword. The intruders turn out to be former teammates of Kristoff seeking revenge against Kelvin. Rion fights against them while Kelvin and Sarah observe from afar, assessing his skills. Rion emerges victorious, celebrating his first triumph. While Sarah cleans up the mess, Kelvin confronts and captures the leader of the intruders. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of Tryson, Emperor Zell holds a meeting with his generals, Prince Asgrad, Tristan, Dan, and Princess Shatola. It is revealed that Kristoff was capturing slaves under Tristan's orders. The Emperor is disappointed by this failure and concerned that it may lead to a war with the neighboring kingdoms of Gon, Torridge, and Daramus, who are forming an alliance against them. Tristan suggests going to war, claiming that they are stronger than the three kingdoms combined. Prince Asgrad supports this decision, believing in their strength and wanting to test his newly acquired powers. However, General Dan and the princess vote against starting a war, cautioning that the other nations may not be as weak as they appear. With a deadlock in the decision, the Emperor appoints his fifth general, Clive, to have the final vote. A soldier is sent to the Magical Knight Order to notify Clive, but he feels uneasy seeing the frozen women standing there. He discovers several women on the floor and informs Clive that he is being summoned by the Emperor. Clive grumbles about the hassle but eventually gets up, revealing himself. Kelvin receives information from Leo that Tryson has been displaying increased aggression towards the Gon Kingdom. Coincidentally, Leo assigns Kelvin a mission for his promotion to S-rank. The mission involves a request from the King of Gon to eliminate an S-ranked monster that threatens an elven village. As the party makes their way to the village, they suspect Tryson's involvement. Suddenly, their carriage is halted by some elves, and Kelvin explains that he is there on behalf of the king. The chief of the elves, Nellies, appears and apologizes for their initial rudeness. He is taken aback when he sees Afiel, mistaking her for his own daughter, Lumel, but soon realizes his mistake. Intrigued, Kelvin expresses his interest in knowing more about Lumel. Nellies explains that 20 years ago, the village was attacked by the Flame Dragon King, and Lumel sacrificed herself to become his bride in order to save the village. However, Lumel was later found dead in the forest, and fearing the dragon's potential return, the elves fled to Gon. Sarah suggests that Afiel might be Lumel's child with the dragon, but Malphina points out that Afiel's father must be a human, as it would be impossible for an elf and a dragon to conceive a child. Regardless of her parentage, Afiel is content with her current family. Returning to the mission, Nellies reveals that the village has been attacked 3 times, and elves have been kidnapped. Calvin finds it peculiar that monsters are involved in the kidnappings. He devises a plan and constructs a stone barrier around the entire village. A group of Tristan soldiers, accompanied by controlled monsters, approaches the village, boasting about their strength. However, they suddenly come under attack and become disoriented. Afiel, using her ultra-long-range archery magic, shoots at them from a tower. The soldiers report the dire situation to their commander, mentioning that unknown adventurers are wiping out their forces. Malphina and Rian encounter the soldiers, prompting the commander to summon their strongest monster, the S-ranked Gigat Lord. An enormous giant awakens, and Malphina gives Rian the opportunity to prove herself by fighting it alone. Rian charges up the giant's arm but breaks her sword during her attack. Despite this setback, she remains determined to prove herself. Calling for Clotho, she retrieves 3 new swords and engages in a combination attack with her dog. Using triple wielding techniques, she defeats the giant. As it falls, the commander commands the giant to transform, revealing its true form as it erupts in flames. Sarah feels disappointed that she didn't get a chance to fight, but Kelvin is confident in Rian's abilities. Unfazed, Rian launches another attack using her triple wielding technique and successfully defeats the monster. She celebrates her victory with Malphina while the defeated commander cries. Kelvin and Afiel observe Rian's success from a distance. Suddenly, they are attacked by a powerful energy blast, but Kelvin manages to shield them from the attack. General Clive appears before them, and Kelvin realizes that Clive is a formidable opponent, which excites him. Clive takes an interest in Afiel and attempts to hypnotize her into becoming his slave. However, Kelvin intervenes and stops him, using his appraisal skill to recognize Clive's unique abilities and the fact that he is also from another world. Clive expresses surprise that they are both from other worlds, and Kelvin instructs Afiel to retreat. She turns invisible and returns to the village. Meanwhile, Kelvin transforms the tower and creates 4 obsidian blades. He commands the blades to attack, but they are easily halted by Clive's helix barrier. Clive dismisses Kelvin's attempts and boasts about having outnumbered him. However, an unexpected attack pierces through Clive's barrier as Afiel shoots at them from below. Kelvin summons 4 golems to wield his blades and sends them to deal with Clive's knights. Left alone, Clive summons his staff to fight Kelvin. They engage in a magical aerial battle, with Clive chasing after Kelvin. Clive launches a barrage of energy attacks, but Kelvin evades them, though his knights suffer the hits. Kelvin warns Clive about his knights, but Clive remains unconcerned, claiming to have plenty of replacements. The chase comes to an end, and Clive arrogantly boasts about his powers, irritating Kelvin. The 2 adversaries charge at each other, resulting in a fierce clash. Kelvin's staff gets destroyed, and Clive ends up with a scar on his face. Distraught over the scar, Clive vows to crush Kelvin with his strongest S-ranked spell. He gathers energy, causing a deadly hurricane to form around him, sucking up everything nearby. Kelvin has no choice but to draw his new staff, the S-ranked Black Disaster. Focusing his energy, he transforms the staff and leaps toward Clive, effortlessly cutting through his magic and severing both of his legs. Before Kelvin can deliver the final blow, Clive teleports away, saved by General Tristan. Tristan admits to being behind the attacks on the elven village but quickly teleports away. Kelvin feels disappointed with the outcome of the fight, but the elves celebrate their victory. Malphina, Sarah, and Rian compete in a race back to Kelvin to see who will receive praise. Rian creates a new skill and wins the race, earning Kelvin's congratulations for defeating the giant. Meanwhile, in Tristan, Clive wakes up to find himself chained up by Tristan. Although his legs have been healed, Clive endures torture inflicted by his own slaves as Tristan experiments on him as an otherworlder. Back at the village, the elves hold a feast to celebrate their triumph. Kelvin watches from a distance, accompanied by Afiel, expressing his gratitude for having such companions. He decides to become even stronger to protect them. Afiel is glad to have learned more about her mother and receives a hair ornament from Nellies that belonged to her. Kelvin helps her put it on and the rest of the party joins them. An elf girl approaches Kelvin and thanks him for protecting the village but reveals that he is the King of Gone, using a special item to disguise himself and observe Kelvin. The king congratulates Kelvin, informing him that he has successfully passed the S-rank promotion. The party joins in the celebration, and the king announces a promotion ceremony that includes a mock battle against other S-ranked adventurers. Excited by the news, Kelvin can't contain his enthusiasm to fight against other skilled adventurers. Unfazed by his love for battles, the party sets off for more adventures. This brings an end to our episode. If you enjoyed the video, then don't forget to subscribe our channel, Annie Explainer.